I see the way you look at me, like you want to, but you won't. I'm begging you to take the lead. You got the green light, take control, 'cause I wanna breathe.
Photographing two people isn't twice as difficult as photographing one. It's closer to 5 times as difficult, because suddenly your focus, the light, the gaze direction and the poses all have to work for two people at the same time. And if even one of those things is slightly off, the photo immediately starts to look chaotic or staged. And that's exactly where many photographers struggle. So today I will show you 3 things you absolutely need to pay attention to when photographing more than one person. And we also look to a real shoot I did with Pia and Wintana here in the Loft studio. Hi, my name is Tanja and I'm a portrait photographer based in Düsseldorf, Germany. On this channel, my goal is to make photography easy to understand. Today I'm taking you along to a shot I did with Pia and Wintana. We did a small commercial style sports shoot here in the Loft Studio 14C. Very simple setup, just daylight, a Sony Alpha 7 Mark III and the Sigma 35mm f1.4. And shots like this make one thing very clear quite quickly. As soon as you have two people in the frame, completely different challenges appear. So let's look at 3 things that will make photographing multiple people much easier for you.
I see the way you look at me, like you want.
The first point is technical but incredibly important. As photographers, we love shooting with wide apertures f1.4, f1.8, f2, and with a single person that works beautifully. But as soon as you have 2 people in the frame, things can get tricky. Because if one person stands just a few centimeters in front of or behind the other, they can easily fall outside the plane of focus. And that happens faster than you might think. That's why when I photograph 2 people, I usually work with a slightly more close aperture. Often I shoot more around f4, f6.3 or f8. That simply gives me more room to keep both faces nice and sharp. Of course, shallow depth of field can also be used creatively. For example, you can intentionally keep one person in focus while the other is slightly out of focus in the background, like in this image. That can create a visual hierarchy in the image or even tell a small story. But if your goal is to show both people as equally important in the frame, a slightly smaller aperture helps a lot.
I see the way you look at me, like you want.
The second point is light. When you're photographing one person, you naturally focus all your attention on the face. But with 2 people, something else often happens. One person is standing perfectly in the light and the other is just one small step to the side. Suddenly, one face is brighter than the other. Especially when you are working with daylight, this can happen very quickly. For example, here in the studio we have these light patches on the wall. They look beautiful, but they also mean the light is constantly shifting. Sometimes half a step is enough for someone to suddenly end up in shadow. So during this shot, I kept checking that both models stayed within the same area of light. For example, here. If you look closely, both faces are inside the same corridor of light, and that immediately makes the image feel calmer and more balanced. Sometimes all it takes is a small instruction like take half a step closer together or stay right here in the light. It sounds simple, but it makes a huge difference. If tips like this are helpful to you, I really appreciate your support. Feel free to leave a like or write a comment. I especially love to know, what do you struggle with most when photographing multiple people? Is it the posing, organizing the shoot, or more technical things like focus and light? Let me know in the comments. And now we move on.
I see the way you look at me, like you want.
The third point is actually the most interesting one, because photos with 2 people work incredibly strongly through psychology. An image with 2 people always tells some kind of relationship. It doesn't have to be romantic, but it always shows a connection, friendship, team spirit, closeness, or shared energy. And our brains read those relationships through body language. That's why it helps a lot as a photographer to understand a few simple psychological signals. One very interesting signal is the feet. People often turn their feet automatically toward the person they are engaged with. So if two people are standing slightly turned toward each other and their feet point toward one another, the image instantly feels more connected. If they don't like the people, they often or they don't feel comfortable, they often turn the feet towards the exit. So look for it. Body direction also plays a big role. If two people turn their shoulders slightly toward each other, the moment immediately feels more natural and familiar. For example, in this image, you can clearly see that both bodies are oriented toward each other, and that automatically creates a sense of closeness in the image. Another signal is the tilt of the head. When two people tilt their heads slightly toward each other, the moment instantly feels warmer and more sympathetic. In everyday life, this often happens completely unconsciously when people feel comfortable with each other. And that's exactly the kind of signal you can use when directing poses. The distance between two people also has a huge influence on how the image feels. If two people stand far apart, the photos feels more distant. If they stand closer together, a stronger connection appears automatically. For example here, just the physical closeness between them already makes the image feel much more harmonious. Another important element when photographing two people is their gaze. There are several possibilities. Both look at the camera, both look in the same direction, or one person looks at the other. For example, this image. This works very well because both are looking in the same direction, which creates a shared sense of movement. But if one person looks into the camera while the other looks somewhere else, the image can quickly start to feel unbalanced. So it's important that you make the choice intentionally. Especially in sport shoots, it can also be interesting to work with different levels. For example, one person standing while the other sits or is in motion. Like here, the different body positions immediately create more energy and movement in the image. One thing is completely normal when you photograph multiple people. You will automatically have more rejected images. One person blinks, the other looks away for a moment, someone moves. That's simply part of the process. That's why during shots like this, I usually take a few more photos. It simply increases the chances of catching the perfect moment. When you photograph multiple people, there are really just 3 things you need to keep in mind. Make sure both people are on the same plane of focus. Make sure both faces are in the same light, and use body language and psychology to create connection between the people in your image. And if you like to see how a commercial sport shoot like this comes together from start to finish, make sure to watch the video I've linked right here. In that video I tell you completely behind the scenes, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!